Hello and welcome to Health and Fitness Redefined. I'm your host, Anthony Amen. Join me today as we take a dive into the world of health and fitness, where we learn how to overcome adversity, depict fact versus fiction, and see health and fitness in a whole new light. Merry Christmas, everybody. Listen to it. This is the episode before the big weekend. I just want to know who's excited that this year Christmas is on a Saturday. I am. It means the whole weekend off. Without further ado, though, I don't want to keep my guest waiting. She was on about 2 months ago, had an amazing, impactful story, and we're going to do a follow-up because I know so many people are interested to say, oh my gosh, there was more that happened in this poor woman's life, but she's an amazing human being. So without further ado, please welcome Ashley Olson. Ashley, welcome back.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. I'm so happy to be here. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody.
I'm excited to do this right around, Christmas is in a couple days. So that's a win right here.
Yes. 'Tis the season for joy and miracles and gathering of family and friends. I love it.
So a little impromptu question for you. What's your favorite thing about Christmas?
My favorite thing about Christmas... Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the food. Just all of that good home cooking, those things that you just literally kind of wait for, like for that one special time of the year, that special thing that grandma or mom or dad or uncle or your neighbor or coworker or whatnot makes just this time of year. They bring it out and oh gosh, those are all always so special. I love all the special treats that come out, not just cookies, but all the savory stuff too. I'm definitely more of a savory gal, so I love all the good savory stuff this time of year. What about you?
My favorite part, it's going to sound really corny, but I get really busy and caught up in my own life sometimes. And it's a way for me to take a step back and show those people that have helped me along the year how appreciative I am of them. Because sometimes we forget to really thank people for helping us along the way. So that's what I love about it. It's okay. Thank you for getting me through this really amazing year, especially the last 2 years. So it's a nice way to give back to all those people.
If you're not sharing the love, throughout the year enough, or you just want to share that extra love, now is the time just to, remind everybody that they matter, and they're important and they're special, and we want them in this world. We want them in our lives.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I want to go back just for those that did or did not listen to your previous episode and tell us a little bit about what happened. Real brief, summarize what happened last episode, and then we're going to chime on into what happened down the line. So,
okay. In a nutshell, in a very tiny or chestnut shell, we might even say, since it's Christmas time. In a very tiny nutshell, I was paralyzed in a car accident when I was 14. Family was driving to a reunion, hit a really bad monsoon rainstorm, van spun out of control, rode off the side of the road into a ravine. I was paralyzed from it. My dad was killed on impact. Little sister had minor injuries. Her elbow did a full rotation, broke her ankle, and my mom's legs were completely crushed underneath the dashboard. So just crippled severely. She's basically walking on metal these days. So definitely life-changing event. I was on my way to get a basketball scholarship at Stanford, was very physically active, dancer, basketball, that kind of thing. And, life was just like, hey, you think your life is going this way? We're going to throw you a curveball and now you're paralyzed and you can't walk. How are you going to deal with it?
Yeah, and just totally shocking. And I think just a little bit of appropriateness. You said your sister's birthday is on Christmas?
Yes, my little sister who was in the car accident, her birthday is on Christmas Day. She's a Christmas baby. So Merry Christmas, Lori, and happy birthday.
Merry Christmas and happy birthday, Lori. We appreciate you.
Yes.
So this happens. You end up paralyzed. It totally shocks your family. You go on and you start empowering other people that are stuck with a wheelchair like you are and giving them hope, and which is amazing. And you're an amazing person. So talk to us about, because you said it happened again.
Yes. So the reason why I wanted to come back on the show is because I went through something super gnarly really recently that was very similar to this accident that paralyzed me. I could have never imagined this happening to me, as I couldn't imagine this first accident happening to me. And this happened somewhat recently, like I said. It was in March of 2020, right before all the COVID shutdown stuff was happening. I was in New Zealand, traveling around by myself. This was well over a decade. I could even say 20 years of dreaming about going to New Zealand. I remember being paralyzed already, and my older sister, who wasn't in the car accident with us, she was coming home from school, and she was doing all these study abroad things, just doing all this cool college life. She was my cool older sister, and she did a trip to New Zealand. And just everything she said about New Zealand, all the people and the nature there. I grew up camping and hiking. My dad was a park ranger, and so nature education was a huge thing in my family. Like, did a lot of camping and hiking. And so I love being in the outdoors. I love being in the outdoors. And that was one of the reasons why I started my website, wheelchairtraveling.com. And so I was over there documenting trails and access and, what's accessible and how everybody's going to do that. But before I even got there, I never thought that I could go to New Zealand on a trip, let alone by myself. I remember my sister sharing all these pictures and photos with me, and me just like drooling, just wow, like this is heaven to me. Like, this is literally heaven on earth. I'm from Northern California, where we have a lot of ferns and redwood trees and whatnot. So going to New Zealand is like the mecca of ferns, I feel like. I mean, they're trees, they're ginormous ferns over there. And it was just so lush and beautiful, something that I always wanted to see. But her showing me pictures of the trails and things that she did, and her explaining to me about access, what was accessible, what was not accessible, I was just thinking, yeah, there's no way that I could go on this trip. Like, New Zealand does not sound very accessible, especially at that state of where I was. I had newly just become paralyzed. And so I was still kind of, trying not to fall out of my wheelchair when I hit a rock sometimes, or just some of these small things that I was still learning how to do. And so mentally in my head, I'm like, okay, well, maybe one day I could, hire somebody, or somebody who I know could, rent a car and drive around with me, and, they could help push me, and maybe they could help, me get around New Zealand, maybe someday. And again, so I started this website in 2006. And even before that, I've been dreaming about New Zealand. And almost every single year, I would look into a trip to New Zealand. But for some reason, it never
Did you go
happened.
on trips before that, or was that was your first one?
Yeah. No, I've definitely been on trips before by myself, but I've never rented a car in another country by myself. And of course, in New Zealand, you're driving on the opposite side of the road and all that kind of stuff. So that added some fun adventure-ness to it. But I had been to Japan by myself, which was very empowering. Didn't know I was going to be there by myself. Started off with a friend, but then he had an emergency situation with immigration. His wife was from Australia, so he actually had to go back to the States and deal with that. And he left me in Japan by myself for 2 weeks. So I kind of got a little bit.
That's like a little throw it into, figure it out kind of thing.
Literally. Well, I mean, it was like, okay, like I'd only been there for like 24 hours. He was leaving. I definitely had the opportunity to go back with him. But that's a long flight. I mean, that's definitely a long flight. That's definitely a commitment. And I'm like, you know what? I'm here. This was also a place I've always dreamed about going. And so, like, I'm just going to make it work. I'm just going to try and make it work. So he was fluent in Japanese. That's why I also decided to go with him. And he wrote down a couple phrases for me, like, where's a taxi? Like, I need or where's the elevator? I need a taxi. I can't reach this, just simple things like that. I basically never had to use that, because with charades, and a little bit of English, like, people understood what I needed. But so that definitely gave me, the confidence that I could go somewhere, by myself. And I definitely looked into having other people go with me on this New Zealand trip. It just didn't work out for anybody. And for some reason, I just felt this urge, like this really strong urge, that I just really need to try and push this year to make this all happen. Even though there was other things in my life, personally and professionally, that were a little askew. I'm like, you know what? Like, this is the time. This is the time. For whatever reason, I got that fire lit underneath me. I'm like, we're going to New Zealand this year. Like, we're going to figure all of it out. We're going to do this. And so again, there was definitely like, some moments of fear, just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But more
just
so.
as a side question, just because now I'm thinking, you mentioned cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have wheelchair accessible vehicles for those that can't move their legs for rental cars?
So what, in different countries, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends on where you're going. A lot of companies nowadays can put hand controls on any vehicle. So that's all you need is like hand controls and like a suicide knob, so you can back up and turn and whatnot without using both your arms. That can definitely be arranged. Even in the United States, all the major rental companies, I believe that, I think even legally they're required to provide this. But you know how the law goes. Sometimes you have to work extra hard still. But yeah, I mean, it was available. They put hand controls on and actually had a ramp in the back. But the problem is that I was traveling by myself and I was driving. So the ramp actually didn't go all the way to the front of the vehicle. So I still had to take apart my wheelchair each time and put it, in the seat next to me and so on. But then I actually made space in the back so I could just slide the back door open and then just pick the wheelchair up and put it all in the back. I say it very nonchalantly, but yeah, it definitely took some skills and some muscles and coordination to be able to do that a bunch of times, especially.
Great workout.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, every day, like I would eat dinner, take a shower, and like go to sleep. And it would be like 6 o'clock, cause I would just be so exhausted from the day, getting in and out of the car and hiking and whatnot. So finally made it to New Zealand, traveled all around New Zealand, hiked my ass off like everywhere. I mean, oh my gosh, like I went paragliding, I went ATVing. I mean, like I went kayaking. I definitely did all the really great outdoor adventure stuff that you do in New Zealand, which is why one of the main reasons why I went there. Absolutely epic, beautiful. Every day that I was there, I was just drooling and just screaming out the window all the time. Oh my God, this is so beautiful. And I even started just cracking up and laughing at myself because I was kind of almost annoying myself. I'm like, Ashley, like, we know it's pretty. Like, we know it's pretty. You don't have to say it every time we turn the corner. We would turn the corner and then this beautiful lake would appear with a mountain. And it would just be so amazing. And I would just, react. She was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. So it was just hilarious, like being there by myself and talking to myself sometimes.
What advice would you give to other people that are in similar situations as far as going? And we didn't get to the good part yet, but I'm just curious. So just how would you encourage others, or how do you, because I know you do it already, that are in the same boat as you to just take these trips and just go?
I mean, nothing is like guaranteed. There's going to be like, even if you can walk, it's like there's rainy days, maybe that zip lining plan, like that's going to be canceled, like there's no control over that. So you just have to keep rolling with the punches, and like, okay, that doesn't work. What else can I do? That doesn't work. Okay, well, what can I do over here? And then just don't get so hung up on an activity or a destination or event, that doesn't work out, because there's something absolutely fantastic and amazing just around the corner. So keep those eyes open. But one of the reasons why I felt also so comfortable going to New Zealand by myself is because, like, after going through that initial hump of kind of being fearful of just like, oh my God, can I do this by myself? And starting the initial process of finding a couple places that I could stay at, I was just like, okay, yeah, like New Zealand is very accessible. Like, when I would tell people I need a hotel with a roll-in shower, they knew exactly what I was talking about. There wasn't there wasn't like a hesitation, like, oh my gosh, wait. So if there's like a little step or like, I don't know, like there was nothing, there's no confusion whatsoever. I felt that they completely understood what I needed, which oftentimes I don't get that in the States. When I call to make a reservation, I'm like, a roll-in shower. So it still has all the grab bars and all the other handicap stuff, but like I can roll into it without stepping on anything or having to go up anything. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've run into hotel situations where that still happens. But with New Zealand, every single thing, the car rental, like every place I called for hotels, activities, whatnot, I explained, hey, I'm paralyzed. Like, I can't walk or stand, but I'm active. I can do this and this and this. Everybody was just like, oh yeah, don't worry. We got you covered. All good. So I felt so confident and alone, like with the people in general. And there was a part of me though that just was thinking like, is this New Zealand just like laid back nature though? Are they just like all calm and cool and collect and that's what it is? Which is true, which is 100% true. But even when I got there, you know, they were just, the way that they talked to me, the way they interacted with me was just overall different compared to a lot of countries that I go to, or even just here in the United States. There's definitely like a very equal level playing field because people who are paralyzed or even have a more severe paralysis than myself, who don't have a lot of use of their arms, for example, still go paragliding. Like there's a guy,
awesome.
there's a guy who I interviewed, and he actually goes paragliding by himself. He like sets himself all up and just launches himself off a cliff and goes paragliding.
That's amazing.
He's like, I think he jokes around like sometimes, you know, at certain hotels, he's just like, yeah, sometimes I can't get into certain hotels or certain restaurants, but I can jump off a cliff and go paragliding. Which is, you know, just, I mean, you have to laugh at these things like sometimes, you know, just kind of see the irony and whatnot and just the humorness of life. So I was having just the best time in New Zealand. Like it was completely fulfilling like every fantasy and dream that like I had about New Zealand and then some. Just such a great time. So it was the second to last day that I was in New Zealand, and I literally had done everything on my list. I literally was resulted to, I looked on a map on my phone and just saw something green and blue, and I'm like, okay, I'm going there. Like, I don't know like how big a body of water it is or what it is, but like, okay, we're just gonna go here. Okay, let's do that. And so it was to this lake, and I'm driving out there, and I see the entrance like to the lake, you know, it says the sign and everything like that. And I get back on the road, and I'm driving along, and it's kind of a very long, windy road. It's a dirt road with gravel rocks and like those really thick gravel rocks. But in the middle of the road, you can see the tracks from a previous car that had gone before me. And there's just one track in the road because the road was just so narrow and small and rocky that there was just one set of tracks because the road wasn't that big. And there's farmlands. Like I'm surrounded by farmlands. I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm driving for like a good long while. And like I'd already passed the sign for the entrance of the lake. And I'm like, is this right? Like, did I miss a turn? But I didn't miss a turn because it's just a 1-lane road. So I couldn't, but it just felt odd that it was just so far out there. But after driving like, you know, a half an hour, I'm like, okay, well, like I'm committed now. Like I'm committed to this. I just might as well see this all the way out. Drive all the way out to the lake. Lake is spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. Beautiful. Totally worth it. There was me and I think one other like, you know, tour group or, you know, locals that were just hanging out there. Absolutely gorgeous. So I spent some time there and then decided to, you know, to go back to maybe do something else. And I got on the road, and the one set of people who I saw at the park were also leaving too. And they were driving faster than me. So I pulled over to the side of the road to let them pass. And then I kept driving along, and I'm driving along. And remember, this is a dirt road with like, you know, rocks on the ground, you know, for traction. And there was that track in the middle of the road from the previous cars that usually cars follow because so you don't roll over the rocks. It's the most secure place to drive. And so I'm following the tracks, and the road takes a very not a crazy sharp turn, but like a fairly sharp turn to the right. It turns to the right, and then it goes down a slight incline. And as I'm going down the incline, I lose complete traction of the wheels because the incline going down this one particular spot, that road track that all the tires were leaving from previous vehicles running on it is not there. In this one particular section going down this one particular slope, there are no tracks. There are no previous tracks, so it's just a solid wall of rocks. So my vehicle immediately starts to slide a little bit, and I'm holding onto the wheel with all of my might and thinking in my head, and I don't have 4-wheel drive, which is not great in this particular situation. So I'm really trying, you know, just to stay in the middle of the road, but the car is so heavy. It's like this dead weight that's kind of pulling me to one side of the road. And in general, I was trying to keep the car going to the right side of the road because that's where a hillside was. The hill went right along the road. And so that's where I was trying to, keep my car from going, as opposed to the other side of the road, which was a ravine. So I'm trying to keep my car in the middle of the road, and it's not happening. It's not happening. And right on each side of the road, there are some dirt ditches, so water can be dispersed without going onto the road. Little water drainage. And I'm also trying to avoid that as well, because it's really deep. And I know that if any one of my wheels hits that, it's gonna spin me a little bit. So I'm really, again, trying to stay super hard in the middle of the road. And I'm driving along, and I can't hold on to the car anymore. The front left wheel hits that water drainage system, and the car goes immediately flying into the air. I just go shooting off into the air, into the ravine. And I remember flying into the air and just kind of thinking like, okay, yeah, this is happening. This is happening right now. Like, okay. Like I wasn't really scared or nervous, but I was just like, okay, yeah, this is happening right now. All right. And I blacked out for a second. And I blacked out for, I'm not sure like how long, but I blacked out. And when I woke up, the car was still rolling. It was still rolling. And I remember seeing the driver's seat, the driver's side up on the ceiling, and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to literally crawl out of the driver's seat to get out of this vehicle. But luckily it kept rolling, and it stopped. So I'm like, oh my goodness, it stopped. Kind of checked myself, patted myself down, like, okay, I'm alive. Like, am I alive? Yes, I'm talking. I'm alive. Nothing's bleeding. Nothing seems broken. Like, everything seems fine. And for some crazy reason, I still don't know exactly how the car did it, but I was going one way on the road, and when the car landed, it was faced the opposite way. So I'm not sure, flying off the road and it flipping around and kind of doing a twist around maybe the other side, it then landed the opposite way, facing the other direction. No idea how that occurred.
So you don't even know how many times you flipped?
What's that?
You don't even know how many times the car rolled?
I know. When I was, so definitely, because I went flying off and I didn't even like feel that initial hit. But then I woke up and I remember, it's still rolling. So I don't know how it kind of.
So you get stuck in this horrible situation. Did you have flashbacks? I'm just curious.
No, at that point, it was just like kind of survival mode, just like, okay, like I have to take care of business, like what do I need to do right now? Like, was not thinking about anything else in the whole world, but what do I need to do right now? So again, I checked, make sure that I was alive. And then I'm like, okay, like, how am I going to get out of here? Because I basically like was looking at the road. It was pretty high up the ravine, and there was a lot of all these bushes and trees. So I thought maybe I could just roll, and I went over a fence too. So I'm like, maybe I can just roll over this fence and go back the way I came. That didn't really work out. And there was no really path with the car to go through a tree. So it's pretty obvious, but I wanted to try just to see, just to kind of look, try out the options, try out things that were the easiest. Luckily the car worked. The airbags did not deploy.
What?
So that
really?
was kind of a blessing and a curse.
Wow.
Yeah. The airbags 100% did not deploy. Car still 100% worked. And so I'm like, okay, I'm in this farmland. Okay, there has to be a gate somewhere. Like, there has to be a gate, somehow people have to get in and out. So I figured I would just drive along the perimeter and look for a gate. So that's what I did. I like drove around the whole perimeter, and literally the gate was like completely on like the opposite side of where I was. So I had to drive like quite a few ways, and it was hilly and a little bit gnarly driving with my non four-wheel drive vehicle. And, just saying prayers too, just like, okay, like just, strength and, inner peace, and like, let me get through this kind of thing. But I was, again, so grateful that the car was still working. And so I found the gate, and, but it was halfway up this big ravine hill, because, I had fallen down a ravine. And so there was no way for me to stay in the vehicle and drive up to the gate and unlock the latch. Like, the way it was positioned, there was just no way for me to get close enough to do that. So I had to get out of the vehicle. So I got out of the vehicle, put my wheelchair together, and wheeled up around the vehicle, which was crazy soft dirt, like quicksand dirt, like sinking in like with every stroke. So I'm pushing my ass off, like just to go like 5 feet, to go in front of the car. And then to get up to the gate, like I said, it was like a quarter ways up this ravine hill. So how am I going to do that? The fence that was there was a fence line, and it had these big metal rungs that were about like this, I don't remember exactly, but like, I mean, it was probably at least this far apart. It wasn't super tight together by all means. They were definitely a good distance apart. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna have to do a cliffhanger status and literally just like one rung at a time, just like pull myself up this hill, up this ravine to reach this latch. So that's what I did. It was, again, I'm going also up quicksand as well. The ground and the dirt below me is so soft that it's just like quicksand. So up quicksand, I am grabbing on these rungs to pull myself up so I can unlatch this gate, because, you know, if I unlatch the gate, then maybe I can just get my car back up to the road. So I unlatch the gate. The gate comes flying at me because it's so heavy and it's on a hill, all made of wood, that it almost knocks me out of my wheelchair. Really close to knocking me out of my wheelchair, but it doesn't. So it goes past me, and I'm scaling back down the metal fence. And just because the ground is so soft that I fall out of my wheelchair, I fall backwards out of my wheelchair, just because the ground was so soft, and I'm going back down. It's just, you know, nature and physics. And so, but at that point, I had been working so hard that I'm like, why did I even bring this wheelchair? I don't know. Like, this wheelchair has no value or importance to me. It's not doing anything like for me right now. So I'm just like, okay, we're just going to throw this in the car. Got myself in the vehicle. Then I tried to go up the hill right where I was already parked, even though I knew it wasn't the best, you know, point of reference to go up. But I'm like, okay, I'm right here, just going to give this a try. Tried that direction. No. Like, couldn't get very far at all. Cars, wheels were spinning, smoke coming out of the car. Okay, no. So I get myself lined up to the point where I think I would have the most traction and the best shot of getting up the hill. And, you know, say a little prayer and put on the gas and try to haul up it. And I was about like halfway up, or maybe like 40% up. And again, the car just started smoking even way more. And the wheels were spinning. It was getting absolutely no traction. I'm like, okay, like this is not going to work. So I put it in park, but at least I got like a little tiny bit up the hill, because then I basically took my bag that had like my passport, you know, like phone, a little bit of water in it. I had a vest on that had different heating levels. So I was really excited about that, just in case if I was having to stay there overnight or whatnot, I had something warm. So I started to crawl up this hill. And what I did is I had my bag and stuff, and I would basically just like throw it ahead of me. And then I would, with one hand, I would be pulling the grass, this long New Zealand grass that I am so grateful for, because it is so rooted so far deep into the earth that it was literally like a rope I could use. One hand I'd be pulling the grass, and the other hand I would be pushing with my arm. And I crawled up this sand dune, this dirt sand dune. And if it wasn't for the grass, though, there was just no way. Well, I don't say that there's no way that I could have done it. It would have just taken even more work than I had already conducted. But I was so grateful for that grass. Oh my God. And again, I started to laugh about that, because I was just being so appreciative of New Zealand. Out of all things that had happened, it was a beautiful day. The weather was perfect. I wasn't worried about snakes or anything weird coming out of the bushes, because New Zealand doesn't have any predators. So I was grateful for that. Again, like, wonderful weather. Like, everything has gone smoothly so far. I mean, not smoothly, but like,
yeah, definitely not smoothly. Not the word I would use.
But I've progressed. I've progressed in like the rescuing, so I felt good about that. But I just started laughing because I'm pulling on this grass. I'm like, God, I love you, grass. I love you, New Zealand grass. You're the best. I love you, New Zealand grass. And then I just started thinking about, I'm like, oh my gosh, like marijuana grass too. And I'm like, so that just the parallels of that just started cracking me up, because I was screaming. I'm like, I love you, New Zealand grass. And I was just thinking, if anybody like ever like heard me, like driving along the road, or, way back where, or something like that, how funny that would be. But yeah, I was just so grateful for this really strong New Zealand grass. And so I'm pulling myself up, and I finally get to the top. I mean, going up that hill was gnarly. But I get to the top and I just roll over because I just been staring at the ground for the past, I don't even know how long, just to focus, and decided to take a little break, rolled on my back and was just breathing in the nice, beautiful, perfect weather, New Zealand air, beautiful sky. And then there was 2 hawks that were flying above me, which is very symbolic for my dad. And so I remember laying there and just kind of thinking about my dad at that moment and just thinking like, okay, like, like I can do this. Like, I know I'm not alone, but I'm like, hey dad, like I've done all this. I just, accomplished all of this. I just climbed up a ravine. So I'm ready to be rescued now. Just putting it out there. Like, I'm ready to be rescued now. If anybody wants to rescue me, like if you can work some magic on other realms, like, please, like I'm really ready to be rescued now. That's fine. I've proven myself that I've like rescued myself. Like, I'm ready. But I knew the journey wasn't over yet because, one, it was starting to get darker. It was now, I think, like 4 o'clock. And so I was definitely aware of that time. And this entire time as well, I had not seen a single car on the road that I had been on, not heard a car, not seen a car, nothing. And of course, every once in a while, I would scream for help just for kicks, just in case somebody somewhere like might hear me or something, but nothing. And so I knew I had to get to the road. So somebody could see me if I was going to be rescued. That was like the number one thing. That's what I knew, because where I was, even though I climbed up at this ravine, there was still this huge meadow separating me from the road. And this road was also like very covered in bushes and shrubbery and whatnot. And there was a barn and a shed and whatnot. And I mean, like I said, the grass was very long and tall. So here I am on the top of the meadow. And now like the grass is pretty much covering my entire body. Nobody could see me. And the only opening that was available was down this tiny little like, pathway next to the barn. So if somebody was driving down the road, somebody would really have to be very adamant about looking down this one tiny little opening and seeing somebody waving their hand in the bushes and catch that. So that's why I knew I had to get to the road. Otherwise, nobody would see me. And like I said, there was a shed and a barn there, also blocking the view. And so I was also very grateful for that, because I was mentally preparing myself. I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to be rescued. I don't know when. I know I'm going to be okay. Like, I know I'm going to survive this. That's just definitely not a question now. It's not a question. But I might have to sleep here for the night. So I was already mentally preparing myself of like sleeping in the barn and being like, Ashley, if your ass has to drag your paralyzed legs down this road the next morning until somebody finds you, you will be found. Like, you will be found. But it's just a matter of time. So these are kind of things I'm preparing in my head. But again, I'm crawling across this meadow. And this is done not by the way I was mentioning earlier, by, just pulling with grass and pushing. I was up on my knees and then just kind of doing like an army crawl kind of a thing. When you're paralyzed, you learn that when you go to rehab and whatnot. So I was doing like this army crawl thing, and there was a cow in the corner. And I was praying to God the cow was not going to think that I was some kind of weird predator or anything like that, or like have some weird instincts and want to charge me. So I just prayed to God and just like, please just go away. Like, I mean no harm to you. Like, please go away. And by the grace of God, the cow did like move away. Like it went out of the sight, out of the area. So I didn't have to worry about that. And so I'm crawling along, and finally hear a car. Oh my God. So I'm screaming bloody murder, like, help, help, help. By the grace of God, this car had its windows down, because wow. I wasn't at the road. I was probably about like 10, 15 feet away from the road. So I wasn't terribly far, but like I still wasn't right up on the road. And so I was screaming. And yeah, the car window was down. And so I saw a person wave. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope that they heard me. Saw them stop. And I just kind of collapsed on the ground a little bit, just because I know somebody's coming. I can take a little breath for a moment. And I see 4 people running towards me, and they're screaming like, are you okay? Are you okay? And the thought in my head comes to mind where I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I don't want to make these people worried, thinking that I'm more hurt than I am. So I scream back to them. I'm like, I'm okay. I'm paralyzed, but it's okay. I've been paralyzed for over 20 years. And then I just collapse. And so they come running over towards me and they're like, oh my gosh. And they were these 4 government workers who were out, I say measuring pond scum. Obviously, it's way more advanced than that. But, they're out doing their biological, like testing stuff out in the middle of nowhere. So that was the only reason why they too were out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And they were going home for the day. And luckily, by the grace of God, they found me by super miraculous. And so they're like, oh, do you want us to get your wheelchair? I'm like, yes, step 1, get my wheelchair. So they go down, get the wheelchair. They take me back to my hotel because I'm like, yeah, from there, I already made really good friends with the owner of the hotel. She was like a mom, like to me, or my mom, because that's what they call them over there, my mom. And super sweet lady. And so I'm like, no, just take me there. She can take me over to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. Even though I know I was fine, like I didn't think I need to go, but I'm like, okay, you were just in this car accident. You're trying to fly home, or not fly home tomorrow. You're trying to fly to Australia tomorrow. Let's just make sure that everything is okay. So it's pretty late, like nothing's open, and I'm like I'm positive that I'm fine. Honestly, like I'm positive that I'm fine. Now I'm pretty much only going to comply with the mom at the hotel, only just to appease her and to make sure that she knows that I'm okay, so I don't worry her. And so the next morning before I get on a plane flight, we go to the doctors, and I experience medical system outside the United States, which was absolutely fabulous. And, talk to a doctor, explain what happened. And the doctor is just looking at me with a mouth open, just like, and you're here. And you're here. Yeah, I think you're okay to fly. Yeah, I think you're fine. I think you'll be okay. And so like I got on the plane and that was it. The farmer later told me, because on the drive home, actually, with everybody from the government, we stopped at the nearest house that we saw. We thought maybe it was the owner of the land, or at least they would know whose land it was. So they put us in contact with the appropriate farmer because it wasn't the right farmer. But when we talked to him, the farmer was just like, oh my God. He was just like, you are so incredibly lucky. Like, I can't remember the number now because it was just a lot going on. But like, I know there was like number of like 7 to 10. There's several like numbers that like of people who have died like on that road, let alone like been severely injured or otherwise on that road. I guess in all of New Zealand, it's a very, very notorious road for messing people up. So he's like, you are so lucky that you are in such good condition and blah, blah, blah. And he couldn't believe that I was paralyzed. But he was such a good farmer. He's like, oh, I already have the car towed up, from down the ravine. I have it towed up to the road. So whenever insurance wants to come and collect it or do whatever they want with it, they can come on by. And like, oh,
wow, how a nice guy. See,
yeah,
there's good people out there.
Guy. Okay, but then so another crazy part of this whole story was that one of the first places that I stopped at in New Zealand on the West Coast, I love rocks. I absolutely love rocks. And this one particular place had a place that you could carve jade rocks. And so I'm like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that activity. Like, of course I'm going to do that. So I go there, and I heard such great things about this family, and like the production and just everything was so warm and welcoming. I'm like, oh, that sounds like my kind of people. Let's do it. So I pull up there, and when I've pulled up to like maybe like a business, and nobody's really been around, or business people have been around. No tourists have been around, but people who just own the business are around, and they see me. A lot of time, like they will come out and ask if I need help. And in this particular situation, I was getting my wheelchair out, and there was a guy walking back and forth, definitely looking at me. It was very obvious what I was doing. And he just like paid no mind to me whatsoever. He like kind of stared at me, like what I was doing. So it definitely registered what I was doing, but he just, kept moving on. And I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't very nice. He didn't even say hello. And same thing, like he kind of got me started, and like this daughter came out and, like kind of a little bit more friendly. And I get started with the business, and the mom comes out because she's the head honcho. She is the chief of the house. She is an indigenous native to New Zealand. So she's like very spiritually grounded and connected with all that kind of stuff. And she came out to explain kind of more about like what I should be doing and more details. But again, I wasn't really getting this like very warm, like welcoming experience, which I just thought was kind of odd. I'm like, okay, well, it's 10:30 in the morning. It's not that early, but maybe they're just not morning people. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Like I wasn't trying to like really think about it or really like dwell on it or anything like that, because, we all have bad days, we all have off days and whatever, and that's fine. And so finally it's revealed through the sister or through their daughter that their son was just in a horrible car accident the night before. And so that's why they were in this very serious mode. Like, it was just sadness, they were just like very concerned, very focused. He was the only one injured. He was with a group of his friends, and he was driving along a dirt road, very similar to what I was on, texture-wise and everything, going around a corner. And because of how many people were in the vehicle, the car tipped over and they rolled into a ravine. And he got the worst injury. And there was other friends who like broke a couple bones and whatnot. But it was revealed to me through the sister that he was actually paralyzed. And I was absolutely blown away. I'm like, okay, here I am traveling this country, something that I've dreamed about, like, and everything that had brought me to this, being paralyzed, not thinking that I would be able to do it, but here I was doing it and I was accomplishing it, and just everything that I've had overcome in my life, being paralyzed and everything I felt like was this trip, it was just like the catapult, like, yes, I've overcome it. Like, I got this. And I was just blown away. I'm like, there's just no coincidence. There's no coincidences that like on this one particular day that I choose to come here, that her son was paralyzed the night before. So I'm trying to I'm now super open about my paralysis and telling them about my story and everything, which is definitely easing their fears significantly. And I'm just like, yeah, here I am in a different country, traveling around by myself. Your son is, 17, like, he's going to be okay. Like, you do not have to worry. Like, he's going to be okay. But then it came, it came to be that actually the son, though he was paralyzed, he was home. And I guess he saw me at one point. I was out like stretching, just taking a break from my little rock carving activity. And he came outside and he could walk. So he did have a spinal cord injury. He did have he was technically paralyzed, but it just depends on the paralysis. And, the spine is a very complicated thing. And so he had a big brace on, like I definitely had when you become paralyzed, because you want to keep that spine, in the same place. You don't want it to be moving around while it's healing. And so he came down. I saw him walk down 2 stairs. Granted, he had the help of his sister with one arm and whatnot, but still. And so I turned to the mom and I'm just like, he can walk? You didn't tell me that he can walk. Like, if your son can walk a little bit right now, like a tiny little bit right now, he will be more than just fine. Like, he will be back to normal. Like, I mean, this will just be an experience for him, like he'll be perfectly fine. And so they felt so relieved. They felt so relieved that it couldn't be reversed, that he could, not get worse and all that kind of stuff. And we just sat around the table, just like talking like we were family members. Like, I felt this very deep, I don't know if like past lives or whatnot, but I'm like, I don't know, somehow, somewhere, like we are connected on like a deeper level for sure. So it's just so crazy to me that then 2 weeks later, pretty much the same exact thing that happened to him, like being in that car accident on the same exact road, like not same exact road, but same type of road, turning around the bend, car flipping, rolling off the side of the road. That same exact scenario 2 weeks later then happened to me. And the parallels between those 2 accidents, let alone my first accident that paralyzed me, is mind-boggling to me, where I'm just like, okay, I can rescue myself. I will survive. And yes, of course, like I said, it was right before all this COVID stuff happened. So I was very not aware of the beginning of everything, because I was just traveling around, hiking. I didn't have the radio on. I wasn't watching TV or anything. I was just hiking all day, every day, going to sleep, waking up, hiking. And so once I finally got to Australia and I realized how bad it was, I was just amazed. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to die from this. I'm not going to die from this. Like, if I were to die, like I had my out. I literally just had my out. Like, God showed me a window if I wanted to go, but like, no. I'm not done yet here. I still have a lot more to give, a lot more to do, a lot more to experience on this earth. So I'll be safe and healthy and make sure everybody else is as safe and healthy around me. I'm just going to keep going.
What a crazy story, Ashley.
Right? Oh.
You seem like just relieved to kind of like get it off your chest. You're just like, ah.
It is. I'm so happy just to share it, because I've definitely shared it verbally, with like family and friends, but just to share it on a platform just means the world to me, because I don't know. So thank you for allowing me. I don't know if it'll actually like help anybody, or if it will like empower or, enlighten or uplift anybody. I hope it will. But for me personally, it's so,
well,
been so meaningful
answer
to
this
share it.
question, and this will pretty much solidify it. Would that experience, would it make you more likely or less likely to not travel on your own in the future?
Oh, I'm totally going to be traveling. And thank you for bringing that up, because actually that was something that I did question. On the ride home. I was asking the government workers, I'm like, hey guys, is this a sign that maybe I shouldn't travel by myself? Not to say like I shouldn't travel, maybe I shouldn't travel by myself. And all 4 of them at the same time were like, no, that's not what it means. You survived. You're perfectly fine. You need to get back on that horse, basically. And I'm like, oh, you New Zealand people, you're so tough. You're so tough and grounded. I love it.
To me, it means like when you're afraid of doing things, you always think of worst case scenarios, right? And you're like, oh, if this happens, I'm screwed. But that happened and you weren't screwed.
Yeah, no, it was so funny. It was like literally every step of the way, even though it was an accident, it's like a bad thing or whatever. It's like I literally got the best case scenario of that bad situation at every step of the way. I mean, yes, it was difficult, but it was doable, and it was not because like I wasn't thinking like, oh gosh, like, how am I going to get through this, or like, oh, this sucks. I'm just like, no, this is what we have to do. We have to get this gate open. And I remember too, actually, the part that I didn't talk about, where when I was trying to get the gate open, my thing, like I was like just like a 1/4 of an inch short. Like I could not get any closer, and I was just a 1/4 of an inch short, and I kept trying and reaching, and I'm just like, oh, like, Ashley, like this is the only option right now. Somehow, some way, your finger needs to grow a 1/4 of an inch. This is just what needs to happen. Like, this is what needs to happen. So, I mean, go gadget arms, fingers, whatever. Like somehow, some way, my arm was able to stretch just a little bit more, to just barely get that latch open. So it was just amazing just to be. It was very powerful, like being in that moment of just, okay, yes, what do I need to do next? Not thinking about anything else, not worried about anything else, but just, okay, what do I need to do right now? And
I just think the biggest take home is if you're sitting at home, you're listening to this, and you had something in your life happen to you, I think they just need to contact Ashley right here, and just a little reminder, like, look what I went through. So that's nothing.
Well, I've gone through a lot of physical stuff for sure, and I've definitely gone through a lot of like mental challenges as well. But it's like I never like to compare experiences, because it's like something, like that I find so small could be a huge deal to somebody else, and vice versa, So it's like, we all have our Everestes that we have to climb, that we even set for ourselves. So it's about overcoming those mental barriers. And I definitely feel like I overcame a huge mental barrier by just staying focused, figuring out what I needed to do in the moment, and just carrying on.
Well, I just got to say, I hope that next year you just keep going, you keep pushing, and you take more trips on your own. And that would be the best Christmas gift for you.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. It will undoubtedly happen. I have places that I want to go to. It's just not time quite yet. International trips, especially, going to Europe or whatnot. Like, of course, if you want to go to Europe, a lot of times you usually want to go to not just one country, but because they're so close, you might want to go to like 2 or maybe even a couple. And that's, something that I definitely want to do. But I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody who's actually like gone hopping around Europe, because how you have to do like the testing and like proving before you go into the different countries, and like the language barrier, having to do that. I'm not sure how that all works. So I'm just like, you know what? There's plenty of trips here in the United States. I'm actually going to be doing this big speech in March at an expo about rediscovering America, because I have all of these amazing wild ideas of like fun, cool things to do just in America. Whether it's, discovering a Stonehenge in America, which apparently we have. But then
I gotta look into that one.
Yeah, and all these like quirky like exhibits and just like fun things, or just doing like a road trip where you just like do a Southwest tour for like nachos, or like, I don't know, go to like the Midwest for like a beer run, you know, or just like do something random. But like people come from all around the world to like come to America to like see the stuff that a lot of Americans don't actually see. I've lived in California my entire life, and in the Bay Area, Yosemite, if you know the right route, can be like 2 hours away. 2 hours away. That to me is a day trip. You can do a day trip to Yosemite. That is actually possible. You can't do everything in Yosemite, but you could go to Yosemite, do a couple things there, and come back. And there are so many people that I've grown up with that have been here for 20 years, 15 years, their entire life, and they've never been to Yosemite. They've never been to Yosemite. They've never driven across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I'm like, why are you worried about like, you know, like all these big places that you can't go to? You have all these cool things still in your own backyard that you haven't explored. So go explore your own backyard. There's lots of cool stuff where you are. No matter where you are in the world, there's cool stuff to explore.
I totally agree, and don't let anything limit you. So just real quick, just remind us again, where can we find you and get a hold of you? Because I know you have an amazing thing where you help out everyone who's in wheelchairs. Go for it.
Yes. So my website is wheelchairtraveling.com. And if you go to that website, you know, I have all the social media handles. I have a YouTube channel. I just wrote a book that came out in September called Confined to a Line, which is all about controlling that perspective, which is so key. And I feel like really is the power to life. You know, if you want to regain your power back, learn how to control that perspective. And I went through something, again, a different story, something totally gnarly that I went through, an emergency surgery, life and death surgery that I had to go through after I was paralyzed. And it changed me. It definitely made me stronger and controlled, you know, how I saw the world.
I love it. And thank you guys for joining us on this week's episode of Health and Fitness Redefined. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button and join us next week as we dive deeper into this ever-changing field. And remember, Merry Christmas.
Merry
That's
Christmas.
all. Till next time, guys.